G'day everyone from down under here in Melbourne, Australia. I've had a lot of people, now that my channel's growing, I get a lot of questions that are sent to me all the time. And I've had an awful lot of questions with people asking, should I get the a6300 or the a6500, or even should I upgrade from the a6300 to the a6500? So I thought I'd talk to you about that today. It's going to be a fairly quick one, but I thought it'd be a great thing to actually go through. And I've found a site which has got the things I was just going to discuss. So I'm going to take you through this site, and I'll put that site in the link down below so that you can also go to this site as well. And that way you can read the whole article. I'm just going to discuss the headings that are actually there at this stage, but you can go back to that article and read it if you want to. Also, in the live chat now, I'll bring that up a little bit later. If you have any questions, I'll bring the live chat up so you can actually ask me some questions live, and I'll try and go through those with you as well. And we'll bring that up near the end. So I won't stop in between to answer the questions, but I will bring these questions up near the end, and we'll talk about those. So this is the site that I'm actually looking at. It's actually from Mirrorless Comparison site, and it's talking about the differences basically between the a6500 and the a6300. I'm lucky I've got both. And I'm going to keep both at this stage. Perhaps if an a6700 comes out, I may sell one of them. But at this stage, I'm going to keep both of those cameras, and I do use them all the time. In fact, I'm shooting from the a6500 now. That's the one that's on the camera facing me. So they're talking about, this has just got 10 main differences that we'll look at between the two of them, and then I'll give you a comparison at the end, or a talk about which one I think is right for you and which way you should go depending on what your budget is and things like that. So we'll also look at that a little bit later as well. So if you're dealing with both of these two cameras, one of the main differences is the stabilization. And this was one of the things that I found was, well, there's two ways of looking at this. The stabilization is really quite good if you're dealing with stills. I haven't found it that good, to be honest, in video. It doesn't make that much of a difference, and I don't think the sensor can move around enough. For instance, the GH5 I've got is much better in the stabilization, and something like an Olympus is even better than that. Their stabilization is just incredible. So for video, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So if you are just buying this camera alone and you're just shooting video with it, I don't think the upgrade to the stabilization is, to be honest, enough. I think you'd be better off saving the money and buying a gimbal, but we'll talk about this in the discussion a little bit later. But if you're dealing with still photography and you want to shoot in very low light at low shutter speeds, well, then that does make a big difference, because you have a big difference in how long you can hold the camera steady. If you have this sort of steady stabilization, than if you don't have stabilization. I can't remember what the actual stop is. It's does it mention it in this? It might be something like 5 stops. I'm not sure. I don't think it actually mentions it. Yeah, 5 steps. So, it does make a big difference, and I've been able to shoot with my a6500 down at a 1/10 of a second and hold it really, really still, and it gives you a really quite good result. You can almost hold it slow enough to get smooth flowing water without putting it on a tripod. That's how good these stabilization systems are. But you can't do that, for instance, on the a6300. So if you're dealing with just still photography, it's a massive difference and a massive upgrade to go for the stabilization on the a6500. If you're dealing just solely on video, I don't think it makes a big enough difference hand holding. I've done tests where I've handheld the a6300 and I've handheld the a6500, and to be honest, I can't tell any difference at all. They're that close, but in still photography, it does make a massive difference. So that's the first thing you have to look at. So let's go down to the next one it's saying here. There's the new front side LSI chip on the a6500. That's giving you faster processing. It's also, they say, giving you better performance for ISO. Again, though, I haven't been able to tell the difference. I can't tell the high ISO difference performance with my a6500 or the a6300. I think they're identical. There's no difference at all. But where it does help is it's actually very quicker at doing things. So if you want to see on the back of the screen, there's much more a bigger buffer in this camera. I think that comes up a little bit later on. But As for this LSI chip that's actually on this camera, I can't tell the difference in ISO. So I think if you're buying the camera solely on ISO performance, you could easily just buy the a6300 or the a6500. There's no real difference in quality at all. I think they're basically identical. Let's come down here. Touchscreen. I do really like the touchscreen on the a6500, and I think they've even improved that on the A9. It's nice just to be able to use rack focus where you're pulling the focus into a point. So I think that is really a worthwhile upgrade if you're talking about going from the a6300 to the a6500. It is a big upgrade going to get that touch screen. I just wish you could use it in the menus and things like that, and I don't understand why Sony is not giving you that option, seeing they make amazing mobile phones, so they can clearly do a touch interface, but they haven't done it yet. But the focus does work really, really quite well, and I often use that when I'm out shooting, especially if I'm doing things like details and stuff and I don't want to get down too low. I'll just basically use my finger and move to the point where I want it to be focused. If I'm doing it for video, and then I can rack focus between 2 points. So again, that's an important thing. So if you do want that, that is a big upgrade between the a6300 and the a6500. Now, another thing that I do use on the a6500 is this S&Q mode. It's really handy if you do want to just pull up and do slow motion, and it bakes that into the actual file. So if you did want to do something at 120 frames per second and it's actually already done for you, you just turn the dials to the selection. The A9 takes that even further because it has it on the top of the camera. But it's a really good feature that I do use often, and it's very, very quick. And like I said, everything is then baked into the file. When I bring it into Final Cut, it's already in slow-mo, so that's another great feature as well. You can also extract these 8K stills from the a6500. I've done it. I mean, it's okay, but I mean, it's not something that I will probably do, but it is a feature. If you wanted to, you can extract stills from the your video that you're shooting. You've just got to remember it's only an 8 megapixel still, which is probably good enough if you wanted to just do an A4 photo, but it's not amazing. And plus, the other thing is too, if you're dealing with, if you say doing it at 50 frames per second or 24 frames per second, your shutter speed then only has to be 50. And if something's moving, you haven't shot it fast enough to slow that down, and you're getting movement in the photo. So it's an issue if your shutter speed isn't high enough to stop still moving subjects. So that can be an issue. That's probably why I never use it, because I'm usually always shooting at that 50 frames per second. Improved shutter mechanism. Now, I'm not sure what the other one was, but they're saying here that it actually lasts longer. Obviously, it's saying 200,000. Perhaps the a6300 was 150 or something. I'm not sure what the difference is there. If anyone knows, you can chime in on the live chat to let me know what the difference is between those two. But it's saying it's got an improved shutter mechanism. Now, updated design. Does it go through... no, it's not talking about that. I've found one of the main differences too between these two cameras is the amount of time it takes to write to the files onto the card and be usable on the back of the screen. The a6500 is much, much quicker than what the a6300 is, and sometimes it does get a bit frustrating if you fire off a series of shots and you can't get you just can't get the images on the back of the screen quick enough, and you've got to wait for it to process, and that can be really, really frustrating. So I do love the fact on the a6500 it's very, very quick in what it does, and it does show on the back of the screen very fast, and then you can actually do other things without it waiting to write. So the buffer is much larger on the a6500 than it is on the a6300. The design is a little bit different. It's got a little bit of a better grip. If you look down here, you can sort of see there that the a6500 on the right-hand side is slightly longer. And this is probably all to allow it to get the stabilization inside the camera. You can see even on the bottom there, it's just a little bit rounder, so it does feel a little bit better in your hand. The revamped user interface is also a little bit nicer. You have these color tabs that are actually along the top here that's sort of a little bit more organized. And again, they've improved this again with the A9. But it is much nicer to use. They're still not amazing, but I'm used to the Sony menus now, so it's not an issue for me any longer. But I do definitely like the a6500 more than the a6300. New metering modes. You've got priority set in white balance. So the metering mode, again, look, I haven't really seen any difference in how it meters, but you can have these priorities set for highlights and things like that in the white balance. So that's another feature if you wanted to as well. There's another one down here, which is the connectivity. It's got Bluetooth connectivity, so it will offer location data. So it grabs the GPS off your iPhone or something like that, which I do use. It's connected every time I turn my iPhone on and the camera on. They connect together. So it will then add location data into your files, which can be a useful thing as well. And it's saying down here, new setting to control overheating, but I know now I've got that on the a6300, so that's been added on a firmware as well. But let's look at the cost, because I'm just curious to see what the difference is in the cost. So I just went to Amazon, and they're saying on Amazon that the cost of the a6500 is basically $1,400. So that's the price. This is US, of course. So it's $1,400. So let's look for the a6300 and see what the cost of that is. So the cost of that as a body only is around about $1,000. So you're talking about $400 difference if you're looking at purchasing one of these cameras. So that can be an issue if you're dealing with a tight budget. But let me come up, I'm just going to answer, and then I'll do a conclusion at the end. But I'm just going to bring up these questions so that we can answer some of those for you guys. I have the Browns just in the house, so welcome, mate. Good to see you here. So let's go through a few of these. I had a question about whether the a6300 was good enough for professional dance photography, and I said yes, of course it is. There's nothing wrong with the a6300, but I did say what lenses have you used, and he's answered me a little bit later on, and he's getting the 85 1.8 and the Sigma 30 1.4. So as long as you've got reasonable glass, the a6000 is going to be ample for that, and it'll be fine. I mean, clearly the a6300 and the a6500 are better cameras, but I would have no problem shooting professionally with that camera, so yes, you can do it. What else have we said down here? You're the first person that can pronounce my name right. Oh, that's cool. Thanks for that. We've got Michael here from Antonio, California. Zach's an a6500 user. What else have we got? Out of curiosity, do you know if the Sigma Tamron are working on any more APS-C E-mount lenses? I love the Sigma 30 1.4, but like more native options. Yeah, look, I don't know offhand because I'm only shooting basically the native lenses on the Sony system, but I'm sure they will. They can't ignore this system for much longer, and they've really got to realise it's a growing market. It's probably one of the only camera manufacturers that's really moving. So I'm sure that Sigma and Tamron and others are going to start supporting this more and more and more as time goes on. So remember, it's still a new system, guys, so don't be impatient with this system. When I always hear people talking about, yeah, Sony has no lenses and things like that, it's basically bullshit because they've only been around a few years. What they've got already is absolutely outstanding if you think about the time that they've had these cameras. The amount of lenses now that we can purchase for this system is incredible. So I'm sure that as it keeps growing, and it will keep growing, that Sigma and Tamron are going to release a lot more lenses, as well as other manufacturers will be releasing lenses all the time as well. Richard said he's got the a6500 as well. Scott said Sony a6300, newish owner here, got it for outdoor 4K videos. I'm an outdoorsman from Scotland. And it's a great video camera for that and shooting outdoors. It's beautiful. Like I said, there's no difference in quality between the a6300 and the a6500 I've found. The 4K footage looks exactly the same. I can't pick any differences in it. The stabilization, like I said, if you're doing it strictly for video, there's no real difference between the Sony a6300 and the a6500 in stabilization. The low light, I've found basically they work exactly the same. The a6500 might be a fraction better, but you would not pick it. So I certainly wouldn't be buying it for that regard, in itself. Hello from Hussein said, hello from California. How are you, David? Looking good, mate? Yes, I'm really good, mate. I've got a wedding tomorrow, so I'm actually shooting my first wedding of the season tomorrow down here. So I'll be on the live show in the morning, but it's going to be earlier. So it's actually going to be, about an hour earlier than this today. I'll be doing it tomorrow. So it's probably going to be around 9 o'clock Australian time tomorrow. Because I've got the wedding to do in the afternoon. So if I get the time, I will be doing it first thing tomorrow morning. So it will be earlier than usual, guys. So if you do want to tune into the Sony news and rumours, it will be a bit earlier than this. Kofo said, "Hey David, this is Kieran Leanne from different account. Hi mate, how are you?" Also said, "Have you seen the new RX10 V1? Only what I've read online, and it seems like it'd be a really good travel camera. That new Sony seems like it'd actually be a really good travel camera. I was hoping it was going to be the a7 III announced or something like that, but it wasn't. But as an all-around travel camera with that lens that goes up to 600 millimeters, I think it probably is a really, really good buy. It'd be a great thing to take if you don't want to be lugging around lenses and things like that as well. So it certainly has its place. I was just a bit disappointed that Sony didn't release their new a7 III or something like that. That'll come though, it's just a matter of time. Sydney, getting my 18-105 for my next trip. What's a good second lens to pair with it? Currently only have one. I'm going to tell you, and I'll mention this every single time someone asks me that, the 24 1.8. It's my favourite lens for the a6300 and a6500. I adore that lens. It's beautiful. It's so sharp. You can focus almost to a macro distance, so very, very close. It has beautiful rendering. It focuses very fast as well. It's nice and small, and it's great for low light. So I team that always up with my 18-105. I put the 24 1.8 together with that. It's fantastic. The 10-18 also is a really good lens. I've got that for my gimbal. I use that on my gimbal all the time, the 10-18. Being on a gimbal, it's good because it's so wide. When you're working on a gimbal, it's better to have wider lenses rather than zoom lenses, or say 100mm lens or something like that, even a 50. The 10-18 is perfect for that. It's nice and light, really, really small, and it's really sharp. I actually really like that lens, and I use that a lot. I even use that on my full frame camera. Sometimes with the A7R2, if I want to go wider than what the 16-35 gives me, I'll use the 10-18, and I can use that for 12mm without any of the vignetting that you get around the outside. So it's fantastic. So if I need more than the 16-35, I'll put the 10-18 on the full frame cameras. Do you support a Premier League team? Yes, I do, and it's Liverpool. That's my Premier League team, and my Championship League team is Preston North End. So they're the teams that I support in the UK soccer. And here in Australia, my Australian football team is the Western Bulldogs, which are my team here. Keith is here as well. G'day, Keith. Studat said a6500 for buffer and touchscreen, IBIS for my beautiful Sigma 30 1.4. Yeah, and look, the buffer is a lot better on the a6500, and that is clearly much better than the a6300. The touchscreen is also, like I said, really useful if you're doing video for pulling things like focus and stuff like that. The IBIS is only useful if you're doing photography. If you're talking about video only, the IBIS doesn't make any difference, I've found, between the a6300 and the a6500. Sid said, what's a good second lens to pair? Oh, the 18-5. I just talked about that a minute ago. Sony RX10 1V is a good buy for video and photographers, and it is. It is actually a good buy. People slam the camera sometimes, but I think it's actually quite a good buy. And just said, is the a6500 good for video recording in summer? Well, I've never had an issue with it overheating. I had the initial a6300 and I had to return that because it had overheating. I got a new a6300 and it had no issues from that point on. Now with the new firmware upgrades, I haven't had any overheating on any of the Sony cameras. So I can only talk from my experience that it's not an issue. But having said that, it is always a worry with me, and even though I love Sony, I love them to death, it's still an issue with me if I had to leave, say, a camera running for an hour in full sunlight, and that's why I got the GH5, because I don't have to worry about that overheating if I'm shooting in 4K. Because I did always have the mind, remember I'm shooting fusion and photography, video and photography at the same time. I can leave a camera sitting on a tripod and then walk away and it will be filming the wedding as it's going on. I was always conscious of the fact that what if that overheated and stopped? And it did always worry me, and that's why I got the GH5. It hasn't happened, but there is the potential for it to happen. But at this stage, no. And particularly, look, to be honest, most of the filming you're ever going to be doing, you're only going to be shooting for, say, 5-10 seconds in most of the shooting that you're going to be doing. You're not going to be running cameras continuously all the time unless you're doing things like concerts and things like that. If you're doing this as a normal videographer, then you're never going to have an issue with them overheating, because they're not on long enough and you're not shooting long enough clips to make it matter. Because you don't want to shoot long clips like that. It would be the most boring video on earth. You want to be doing short clips. And in that case, none of the cameras are going to overheat. Keith said, would you buy a Canon 6D Mark II? No. I wouldn't buy the Canon, no. I'd buy the Sony over the Canon. I'd buy the RX10 1V over the Canon. I'm not impressed with that at all. Canon need to innovate. Canon really need to lift their game, especially now with the Nikon D850 I mean. Canon clearly need to do something drastically, because Nikon have hit the ball out of the park with that. I mean, it's a great camera, really good camera, and Sony need to answer it too, and they will. Sony will answer that with their next camera that they're going to be bringing out. I mean, if you're talking about dynamic range, I think the Sony a7R2 is still a little bit better than the D850, as long as you're talking about the general ISOs. 64 ISO on the D850 apparently is better than what you can get on 100 ISO on the a7R2. But remember, that's nearly 3 years old, whatever that camera, so it's still performing amazingly well for how old it is. Just wait until they release the new a7R model. Keith said, oh, hang on, a couple said, and why Preston? My local team is Nottingham Forest. Well, my family came from near there. They came from Preston when I was originally, my parents were English and they came from Preston. So that's why I support Preston. But I've always supported Liverpool as well in the Premier League. Keith said, Sony RX 101V has 4K video now and up to 960 frames per second slow mode. I know. I'm not sure how good the quality will be at 960 frames per second, but it'd be interesting to play around with it just to see how good that is. Michael said, with the firmware upgrade and the Mickey battery grip on the a6300, I've been able to record 4K 10 plus minutes with no issues. I usually record marching band shows. And that's the thing, like I said, I've had no issues with it overheating. But most people are not going to be recording for, 30 to an hour, unless you're doing like me, which is doing weddings, where I'm leaving that running all the time just to get the vows and things like that. I can't be running back and forth trying to stop it. But there is always an issue with that overheating in the sun, and that's why I got the GH5. But it's just the case with the Sonys. The bodies are very, very small. They're incredibly powerful cameras, and clearly, if there's too much heat there, there is the potential that they may overheat. It hasn't happened to me. I'm Brown said, what do you feel about Apple putting 4K 60p in an iPhone and Sony has none included in their latest release? I know, I don't understand that. They've got to release something like an a6700 that gives you 4K 60p. That's one of the reasons why I went to the GH5, because I want 4K 60p. And when you're shooting with that and being able to shoot 4K and then slow that down 50%, honestly is a game changer, guys. And I can't explain to you how much or how important that actually is to be able to do that. For me as a wedding videographer, as well as a photographer, to be able to shoot 4K 60p is incredible. And now that the iPhone's got it, and I bet you any money that will probably look gorgeous, it just doesn't have the depth of field. But I'm still talking about being able to have beautiful 4K 60p slowed down can be a real thing. So Sony have got to answer that. But I mean, Nikon didn't answer it either, did they, in their D850? So, but they've got to bring out something soon, like an A7S III or a a6700 that gives you this 4K 60p option. It's got to happen. Keith said, I have something to say about the Apple X10, and that's just killing the market for photographers and companies. I'm going to be getting the new Apple iPhone as soon as it's released. The geek in me can't wait. I was bit disappointing now. I've got to wait till November, but I will be getting that, especially because that did have that 4K 60p. Also, some of the lighting that it has on that is incredible. Looking at what I saw in the Apple show the other day, the lighting looks beautiful for the portrait, so it's interesting. Keith said, well, for me, I have no reason to buy a Sony RX100V now. Well, there isn't. If you've got your normal Sony cameras, there is no reason to upgrade to that. I don't think either. What else have we got? Keith also said this place is a threat in some cases, but it will not be true. It will not be true to leaning to many real photographers. Look, guys, the thing here too, Keith, don't ever get worried about saying it's a threat to photographers, because you still have to have the skill behind that camera to take really, really beautiful photos. And look, no matter what's going to happen, the technology is still going to change. And clearly, this is really going to hurt point and shoots. I mean, this will really start to hurt point and shoots now. I think point and shoots are dead. And particularly because now most people are just going to say that their iPhones are just good enough. But until they can get lenses on these phones, particularly that will give you that beautiful depth of field, the iPhone doesn't do a bad job at it with portraiture. But remember, you've got to be a certain distance away for it to work and things like that. Don't start panicking though, because you still need to have the skills to know about lighting. Even though this has that lighting gimmick in it, you still need to have the skills to do lighting, posing, things like that. So you're still going to have a job for years and years to come. It's about the person behind the camera, not the gear itself. So, don't underestimate yourself. What else have we got? The X is the 10. Yes, it is. The X is the new 10. That's the new iPhone 10. So while we get some more questions, let me just come back to here, because I'll just summarize what I'm thinking about this, whether you should upgrade or not. I have a couple of different opinions. If you are doing video and stills, and you can afford to do it, the a6500 clearly is the better camera, because it has the stabilization in the camera, it has the touch screen on the back, and it also has the better buffer. And it's clearly better if you're talking about a camera that will do fusion of all of these things, so a hybrid type camera. If you're dealing with just a stills camera and you're not really interested in video, or you don't want you can't afford the a6500, well, the a6300 is clearly just as good if you're talking about stills and just doing video. It is easily as good. And my suggestion would be, if you haven't got enough money, to buy the a6300. There's another thing that you may want to consider too, is if you want to make the images look really professional and you only have a certain budget that you want to actually spend, I would probably buy the a6300 and buy a gimbal with the money that you save, because it will give you better stabilization if you're dealing with video than just buying the a6500 and not having a gimbal. You will definitely get better footage with the a6300 and a gimbal. A crane or something like that, you might have to pay a little bit more, but it won't be much. Or buy the a6300 and get a better lens if you're struggling on your budget. So if you've only got a budget, your maximum budget would be, say, $2,000, I would probably be getting an a6300 and get the gimbal and some lenses. If budget's not an issue, I would definitely get the a6500. They are both amazing cameras, and that's the thing with this. They are both really, really good cameras. If you're talking about image quality between both of them, they're both the same. It's the same sensor in the camera, so there's no differences in ISO, in still image quality. There is a difference though if you want to shoot in low light with low shutter speeds, because clearly that's where the stabilization comes into play. With video, it doesn't have such a big difference. And like I said, I've handheld both. I've got both cameras. If you're hand holding these cameras, the stabilization is not good enough on the a6500 to hand hold. You could easily do it just as good with the a6300. So that's me summarizing them up. So basically, if you have the money, I would get the a6500. If you are struggling with finances, I'd get the a6300. And then you can also buy a gimbal if you want the stabilization. The money you save also getting the a6300, you could also buy a decent lens. So if you are struggling financially, you may be better off to get the a6300 and a decent lens rather than getting the a6500 and not having enough money to buy a lens. Remember, the real big difference between these two cameras is the glass. If you have really, really good glass on these cameras, it makes all the difference, even if you were shooting with the a6000. I'll just come back to questions again now. They're saying here the waterproof is, that's the iPhone as well, so it kind of destroys the point and shoots. Yes, it does. I think point and shoots are finished. They're definitely finished now, even with the new Samsung. Is it the S8? They're dead. You're not going to buy a point and shoot now. You'd have to be crazy. Wildlife photographers are safe, yes, and that's the thing, it's lenses. Eventually they're going to build these cameras with decent lenses in them, but it's going to be a long way away. And remember, it's still about you behind there. Let's have a look. Keith said, okay, the latest photo on Time magazine of Oprah Winfrey was taken with an iPhone. Yes, it was. And you know what? Jerry Guionis submitted an album that he did with the iPhone in one of the, I think it was WWPI, and he won an award for that. It's the guy behind it, and that's the thing you've got to remember, that it's still the person. Like I said, it doesn't matter really what the camera is in front of you. It's your skills and your ability to be able to manipulate lighting, to do all these other things that makes all the difference, to be able to pose people, to be able to communicate with people. So don't get so stressed about new gear that's going to come out, because that gear is always going to get better, but the skills that you have can never be taken away, and that's the thing that you have to remember when you're dealing with this. Delta Dave said Sony could put 4K 60p in its next version of the a77, a body that is not predisposed to overheating. And I hope they do. That's the issue, I think, that's stopping Sony doing it at the moment, is the overheating. Clearly, it will cause more heat. So that's probably why Sony are taking longer to release the camera than what I would have expected. They might be trying to solve that heat issue. Because it would definitely get hotter shooting at 4K 60p than 4K 24 or 4K 30. So they probably are trying to solve that issue. And I don't know whether they'll be able to do it in a small body like the a6000, a6700 or whatever they're going to call it. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. That's why the GH5 is so good, because it has these massive heat sinks inside and the body is really big. So it can get rid of that heat. So they're going to have to get around that. Cobra bought the Nikon FM10. Cool. You'll have a lot of fun with that. I used to shoot Nikon. I've got an old one over here somewhere. Where is it? Pentax. I've got this old little camera. I originally started out shooting film years and years ago. What else have we got? Ian DeBrand said, seems like Apple didn't learn from Microsoft. We have Windows 7, 8, and 10. I know, I suppose it's just because it's their 10th anniversary. I'm not sure about the naming convention. It's just weird. Perhaps the next iPhone coming out next time will be iPhone 9. I don't know what they've done there. What else have we got? Sony A7 3 spring of April 2018. I think there's probably going to be something announced this year, sometime late this year. Susie's over there still, guys. I think there'll definitely be something announced by Sony later this year, but it's not going to clearly be released until next year now. There's no way they could probably get it out in time. And perhaps that is one of the reasons why that they haven't released anything, is because Sony realised that they've got to add a 4K 60p. They've got to do that in one of their video cameras, and perhaps the bodies at this stage just can't take that, so they're trying to work out some way of getting around that heat. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Nice camera. They were saying about nice camera, but sneak peek of Susie in the background. Isn't nine a very unlucky number in parts of Asia? It could be. I don't know. Perhaps it is. That may be why. I wouldn't think that's the case. I think it's just because it's their 10th anniversary, though, that they wanted to go with that X. I think that's what the case is. I'm looking forward to getting it. So I'll let you know how it performs when I actually get that later this year. All right, guys, any last questions before we finish for the day? Don't forget tomorrow's live show. If I have time, I'll be doing it tomorrow. I've just got to make sure I have enough time to pack everything up today to get ready for this wedding tomorrow, because my wedding season starts tomorrow. So I will be doing the live show, hopefully, but it'll be early, about 9 o'clock my time. So it's going to be a couple of hours earlier than when I usually do my Sony news and rumours. that's about it. Sid said, I'm surprised they did not announce any new lenses. That'll come. It's only a matter of time. Be patient. Sony will release them. Like I said, I think they've done a great job for what we've got so far, seeing everything is so new. Well, that's about it, guys. All right, well, we might leave it there. I'm going to go and get a coffee. I can feel coffee calling me. It's in the background. Can you hear it? It's getting coffee. So I'm going to go and have a nice coffee. Then I've got to prepare everything for this wedding that I'm doing tomorrow. I'm looking forward to actually doing it since the first one of the season, so I'm actually looking forward to it. And I'll catch you again soon, guys, for the next video. Leave any questions down below about what you think about the a6300 to a6500. Leave any questions down there, and you know, we'll try and get that conversation going as well. And if not, I'll see you all for tomorrow's live. If for some reason I can't do it, it's because I'm still preparing for the shoot tomorrow. But I will try and definitely do it tomorrow. But you'll see, because I will put it as a notification, you know, an hour or so before. All right, guys. So I'll catch you tomorrow, and I'll see you all again soon. See you guys.